Hello, my name is Dave Clapp. I'm the station manager for the Michigan DNR Charlevoix Fisheries Research Station. I'm going to talk to you today about environmental principles and habitat priorities for sustainable Lake Michigan fisheries. I'd like to start out by thanking my co-author, Matt Herbert. Matt did an amazing amount of work early on in the process to get this project off the ground and to ultimately deliver the product that I'm going to describe to you today. I'd also like to thank members of the Lake Michigan Tech Committee who put together the data that is the foundation for this effort, and also acknowledge the efforts of Jeff Tyson, who coordinated these efforts for the Commission and facilitated lots of cross-lake collaborations. Vic Santucci, who served as the Lake Michigan Committee Chair during the development of this product and spearheaded the effort, and Jay Wesley, who did the same during his tenure and was also very supportive of my work internally with the DNR on this project. I can't really make this presentation without acknowledging the tremendous work by Ed Rutherford, Bill Horns, and others. About 10 years before the current effort came to fruition, Ed was instrumental in putting together the environmental objectives for Lake Michigan. This report documented the importance of tributary spawning and nursery habitats, coastal wetland habitats, reef spawning habitats, and nearshore habitats. He advocated for promotion of native species abundance and diversity and avoiding further exotic species introductions, and also emphasized the importance of protecting and restoring water quality for fisheries in the lake. This document, the environmental objectives document, formed the foundation for our current efforts in the environmental principles. While it was important, the environmental objectives document didn't lead directly to habitat management actions. So to jumpstart this effort, in spring 2017, the Lake Michigan Committee charged the Lake Michigan Tech Committee with developing a short list of priority actions to protect or improve functional habitats for sustainable fisheries with the focus on Lake Michigan. Development of environmental principles was occurring on other lakes at this time as well, and I mentioned Jeff Tyson's work in helping to facilitate and coordinate these efforts. This was a fisheries-focused effort, and the idea being that sustainable fisheries could occur across the basin if functional habitats were protected in each lake through a systematic, adaptive, cumulative, and collaborative approach that accommodates fisheries values and acts on manageable anthropogenic stresses. I want to emphasize 2 points here. Cumulative was important in that our efforts would ideally build on each other over time to have the most effect on fisheries. And then also manageable, where we wanted to put our money and our effort where they would have the most effect. For this effort to be effective, we needed to identify functional habitats. Whiteside et al. Is a well-known article describing yellow perch life history, and a figure from that article provides what I think is really a perfect depiction of functional habitats. And you can see in the figure, yellow perch spawn in littoral habitats, lay their eggs, the larval fish hatch out, they make a pelagic migration into limnetic habitats where they develop. As they develop, they then begin a shoreward migration and become benthic and move back into littoral habitats. The health of all of these habitat components is critically important for sustaining yellow perch fisheries, and that's really what we mean by functional habitats. Functional habitats in Lake Michigan are identified in this figure, and they include large and small tributary habitats, reefs and reef complexes, the open lake environment, and bays and drowned river mouth lakes. These are all important habitats to varying degrees for all Lake Michigan fish species. Lake Michigan Tech Committee began work on the charge to develop a short list of effective management actions by gathering a tremendous amount of data from across the lake for species identified in the fish community objectives. This information included each life stage for the species of interest, the region of the lake that we were interested in looking at, the status of the functional habitats, impediments to habitat function, how certain we were that those impediments were having an effect on habitat function, potential management actions we might take, and the certainty we had that those management actions would have the desired effect. We looked at time to response, and this goes to the question I mentioned earlier of manageability. We wanted to be putting effort to actions that would have some response in a reasonable amount of time. We also want to know if other species would benefit, so we might have an action that was targeted at walleye, for example, but other species might benefit from that management action as well. And we included references, and we didn't want to just have this based on opinion of biologists around the lake. We wanted to have some references that documented that potential management actions that we were contemplating would have an effect, and this goes to those different certainty variables that I mentioned earlier. To assist and provide guidance to the Lake Michigan Committee, we put together summaries for all the data that we had gathered. This is one example for the impediments category. You can see that biological impediments were important to habitat function in Lake Michigan. And cumulatively, things like the quantity of food resources, the predation, fishing mortality were as important as actual physical habitat destruction or conversion to habitat function. The idea was to develop a short list of actions, and I think our list of potential actions across species, life stages, etc. was numbered somewhere around 10,000. So we obviously talked a lot about the prioritization process. We talked about whether we should focus on certain species, on the certain categories of status, functional habitat status, certain categories of impediment, if certain locations were important, more important than others, whether we should focus on only conducting actions where we had some level of certainty of an outcome, whether maybe species benefits should factor into this more than some other variables. We also discussed whether talking about whether something was actionable in a practical sense and prioritizing our efforts in that way. Some people had interest in prioritizing actions based on certain species types, so whether we're restoring species, whether the species was a native or introduced species. And then practical considerations, such as are there funding sources to address certain impediments. This might be things like dam removal monies or sea lamprey control monies, those kinds of things that might help us prioritize or get us down to a short list of actions. The Lake Michigan Committee ended up conducting some exercises of their own also to help with this prioritization process. These included things like ranking impediments and actions on a high, moderate, low scale, as shown here. For example, if the Lake Committee was relatively certain that an impediment was going to have some effect on a functional habitat, they'd rank it as a high or a 4, give it a 4 on the scale. If they were relatively uncertain about an action actually addressing an impediment to a functional habitat, they would rank it lower. So, and they did this across that series of data that I showed earlier to come up with a comprehensive sort of score for each of these management actions. Following all this work, in April of 2020, the Lake Michigan Committee adopted a short list of high priority regional and site specific actions that they felt, if achieved, would move us closer to achieving our fish community objectives for Lake Michigan. More detailed information on these actions is available in that Lake Committee memo that's posted on the Lake Michigan Committee webpage. But the The actions included protection of coastal wetlands and shoreline restoration work, and these projects were identified primarily in Green Bay and northern Lake Michigan. The tributary connectivity and fish passage work, which were primarily identified in the Peshtigo and Oconto rivers. Some in-stream habitat restoration priority projects that were identified for the Grand River, as well as reef restoration work that was primarily focused in the northern part of Lake Michigan. The really exciting part of this effort is that it has been successful almost immediately. Funding has been secured and work is proceeding on northern Lake Michigan reef habitats. Tributary work is getting underway. Shoreline sites have been identified and funding is being pursued to complete that work. We're going to hear more about some of these projects in upcoming presentations this afternoon. The development of environmental principles and project identifications have also helped us leverage funding that hasn't been available to us previously, and so that's going to be really beneficial to Lake Michigan habitats and fisheries. So while we're up and running and we feel like we're pretty successful with this effort, there's still lots of work that needs to be done. We need to develop a process to include more records, review these records periodically, conduct quality control, and like a lot of these efforts, gathering this data has helped us. I also identify gaps in our knowledge about Lake Michigan, and we're working to fill those gaps. As I discussed, the prioritization process is difficult, and we're continuing to work on how to prioritize across species and areas of the lake and identify the most important products to help improve the quality of Lake Michigan fisheries. We're working across lakes to help develop GIS tools and to it will help in the prioritization process, but also help to provide sort of visible spatial sorts of depictions of where we're doing work and where work needs to be done. And also, we'd like to develop presentations and reports for practitioners, those that are actually conducting some of this work on the lake, so we can see how individual projects fit into the big picture of improving Lake Michigan fisheries. I want to thank you for your interest in this work, and it's been really gratifying to be involved in what we feel is important work that will benefit Lake Michigan fisheries. We're really excited to see kind of how these efforts come to fruition in the coming years here. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about this initiative. Thanks.